In our last episode, Elliot from Marine Collectors showed us how to use medications to treat for ick and velvet. This week, it's actually the tank transfer method. What is that?
All right, so the tank transfer method is actually one that I really like. Basically, the principle is that we're using the knowledge of the life cycle of the parasite to actually remove the fish from that environment, thereby removing the parasites through that process. Basically, what we're doing is through a series of transfers. Every time the parasites fall off the fish, we're removing the fish before it has a chance to reattach. And after a set amount of time, the fish will be clean.
Yeah, so there is a big difference here. We'll share some pros and cons with it. We don't actually believe that the tank transfer method is the best method for most new reefers, specifically those new ones doing this for the first time. But it's a really valuable tool that helps us understand the life cycle of ick, and we're going to explain it today. All right, let's start with the pros to the tank transfer method.
All right, so the first thing is no medications are needed to do it. If the fish is in end stage though, I still would use nitrofurazone, but we're not having to use copper to do this. Everything that you need, you can go out to a Petco, a PetSmart, whatever. You can go get all the things you need to do it, and you can be doing it today. You don't have to wait for copper or copper checkers to arrive in the mail. It's also less harsh on the fish because we're not using those medications either.
And so you did say that there was one in there, being the nitrofurazone. Why would you still use that medication? And I'll note that nitrofurazone is not like copper where it's really harsh to the fish. So no medication still applies here in the essence that it's still healthy and less stress, but why would I use it?
So just like we said in the previous episode, basically what we're looking for is to keep that fish clean. If the fish is in end stage, right, it's got all those little pinprick holes where the parasites enter the body. And basically what we're trying to do is prevent secondary infection, keep that clean so that as the fish heals, actually has the opportunity to heal before it gets infected.
All right, so there are some cons to the tank transfer method, starting with.
All right, so the first thing is that this is not something that's easy to do. There's a lot of areas and a lot of steps and a lot of places that you can mess up, especially if you've never done it before. The first of which is you need to have really strong attention to detail. You need to have very good practice when you're doing sanitizing and you're actually cleaning out the tanks between transfers. That way you're not potentially going to be reinfecting a fish. You also need to have two of everything. You can't just do this with one set of equipment because every time that you move the fish, you can't be using the same equipment that you just pulled the fish out of. The other thing is that it's not good for outbreaks where the fish is already in end stage. If the fish is already just absolutely coated, it's probably not going to like being moved every other day or every 2 days or every 3 days.
Yeah, so the big piece here, I think, is that you have to have that attention to detail, meaning when I sterilize this tank, I move it the fish out of this tank, every last element in here needs to be sterilized. Not a single drop of water can make it from this tank to the next tank, not on my hands, not anywhere. And so this is one of those things where doing this poorly is super duper easy, but doing it great is actually hard. And probably something that if you're doing it for the first time, really easy to mess up. You mentioned a second ago that you wouldn't use the tank transfer method for active outbreaks. Tank transfer is commonly used for prophylactic treatment of QT when you get a new fish, less commonly used for that outbreak for 3 different reasons.
All right, so the first of which is most people, they're going to mistake ick and velvet and they're going to get the two confused. Velvet is incredibly hard to treat with tank transfer. It is possible, but it's a lot more labor intensive and you have to move the fish a lot more frequently.
You're definitely going to do some baths up front to kind of help the whole process. But also, what's number 2?
All right, the other thing is that if you have an entire tank full of fish, 10-gallon tank like this is not going to cut it, not even close. If we were going to, let's say, take all the fish out of this tank, you probably need 60-gallon tanks to do this. And it's a lot more labor intensive to do transfers, every other day, every 2 days, every 3 days. With 60 gallons of water and a couple dozen fish.
Yeah, remember that if you're doing a treatment for something like velvet or ick, especially velvet, you're not actually going to take just the sick fish out. You're actually going to take them all out if there is an actual outbreak of these things in the tank and it's threatening all their lives. And then you're going to have to do this tank transfer method with 2 tanks, probably a bunch of them. And it's just going to get really gnarly fast as you're trying to figure out how many tanks to manage all at once and transferring them. And meanwhile, trying to not transfer a single drop of water from another one. And really, most people are just not going to get it right. All right, so how do you do the tank transfer method for ick? Good news, it's actually the same as the 80/20 QT method with no meds. So watch that video on the 80/20 QT because it's the basis for almost everything we do, and then we just make subtle tweaks for different diseases or different methods of doing things. So in that case, there are a couple other changes other than no copper in the 80/20, and what are they?
All right, so the first of which, we got to keep an eye on the clock. Tank transfer for ick, we don't want to go over that 72 hours, so pick a time, do the water change, do the transfer at that same time every day. Don't go over it. If you do go over, you do have to restart the clock and you have to start the entire process over again. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to rinse the fish in between transfers. So a little specimen container, obviously we're going to have it sanitized prior so that it's clean and sterile. Basically, we're going to rinse that fish before we move it to a new one. The last thing is that we're going to sterilize the prior quarantine tank. So that means we're going to drain it down, fill it up with water. We're going to be doing bleach at 100 parts per million. What it's going to look like is we're going to fill the tank up, let's say with tap water, put bleach in there to 100 parts per million. There'll be a little link in the description on how to get there. Leave it for 4 hours, let it circulate, put all the equipment that you've used in there so that it's all sanitized, rinse it out, then we'll put the chlorinator in there as well. And once that's been done, we'll just let it dry for the next 2 days, or it'll be probably almost close to 3. That way you can be sure that it's absolutely sterile by the time it comes time to use it again.
So just to give you an idea of what we're doing here, instead of relying on those meds to protect the fish, what we're again doing is we're going to put the fish in there for 3 days, the parasites are going to fall off, and we're then just going to physically remove the fish, rinse it off, and put it into a brand new tank. And some of those parasites will follow into a new cycle, they'll fall off in another 3 days, and now we have this sterile tank over here. We're going to move it back to the sterile tank, and we'll just do that process for a few times, and what will happen then is we'll beat out the cycle. The big piece of that, though, is do you effectively sterilize it in between, dechlorinate it in between, and make sure no drops of water are going in between. That is how we're going to do the tank transfer cycle and beat out the parasite, leveraging its own life cycle. All right, next, tank transfer method for marine velvet. Straight up, I would not recommend doing this for an active outbreak. There are probably better methods, especially for new reefers. Starting with why.
All right, so the reason why is that it moves incredibly fast, and fish are often just way too compromised to actually handle the actual transfers. If you were going to do it, you got to move the fish, within every 36 hours. Personally, I would do it a lot sooner than that, but it's just a lot more work than most people are willing to do.
It's a lot more frequent than, most people again say do 30 every 36 hours. If you do the math on that, that means that I'm going to do it at noon and then midnight, and then noon and then midnight. These are really infrequent times, so you could bring it back all the way to like 24 hours, but you can't go past. And also, if I'm going to do it with velvet, usually I'm not going to take one fish out that has it. I'm going to take them all out. And again, we run into that problem with tons and tons of tanks now, or like really big ones, and it's just going to get hairy fast. Also, it's supposed to be done, it could be done for less than 2 weeks than what we do with the 80/20 method, but the 2 weeks gives you a bit of a buffer. So if you are going to try this, I would probably go with the full 2 weeks. All right, so before we get to how you do tank transfer method at home, or what we'd suggest, how do you actually do it at Marine Collectors?
All right, so at Marine Collectors, there's always a select few fish I'm just not willing to put through medications, or at least medications like copper. Basically, what would I do is I pick a set time, and every 12 hours I move the fish, rinse the fish in between. First, third, sixth day, I'll do a formal in-bath in between transfers just to kill off anything like velvet. It'll also treat for broken urinema. But that way we can kind of have an all-encompassing tank transfer. It is a lot of work, and most people aren't willing to do it. But for a few select rare fish, it's definitely worth the extra effort.
So that's a good point. If your profession is taking care of fish every 12 hours, may not be impossible to do. But at home, that would be pretty difficult to do. Also, what you're doing is you're prophylactically treating fish that came in, a single fish.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't imagine trying to do all of these fish every 12 hours. So doing it at home would be pretty difficult. But you can see the difference there, again, between prophylactically treating fish in a quarantine that comes in like a hospital tank where I'm actually treating them when they're sick. All right, so if you got through all that and you still want to use the tank transfer method for an active outbreak in your display, the good news is it's the exact same thing as the ick one we just described, except for you're going to change the timing.
All right, so we're going to be doing it every 24 hours. So pick a time, do it every day, right? Sanitize the tank. Might even be able just to have 3 of these just so that you can actually have one that's already done and ready to go a full 24 hours in advance. That's it.
Yeah. All you're going to do is change the timing. It's going to be a lot more work because not every 3 days, you're going to be doing it every day. There are also variants of the tank transfer method. Actually, Elliot just shared his, which is he's combining that with a medicated formalin dip or bath in between. But I've also seen hybrid methods using hydrogen peroxide as well. Many of these things are what I would call like experimental to some degree, and for the trailblazers or thought leaders, and probably not the type of thing that I would recommend for a first reaver doing this for the very first time. All right, next one, Brook. We're charging through all of them. How do I deal with an active outbreak for Brook? Come in here.